Hello, and welcome to video number 27A in this sub-series of 2 videos exposing the Jesuit Vatican shadow empire and its use of puppet dictators like Napoleon and Hitler as counter-Reformation swords of vengeance against the peoples of the earth. These 2 videos are only a synopsis of a very extensive subject, as time does not permit the coverage of all details here. That has been done more expertly by other authors, and their work is available to access should you desire to do so. The purpose of this summary is to inform and warn all those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, those who have a respect and desire for the truth. First, here is some damning information about the papacy and its Jesuit military order. In 1550, 10 years after the founding of the Jesuit military order, Pope Julius III actually issued a coin stating his claim to universal temporal political power with the motto, "The nation and kingdom that will not serve me shall perish." People, this is the murderous papal threat to mankind that has been uttered by many popes. This threat against mankind still stands today. It began its life in 1215 AD, written into the Fourth Lateran Council under Pope Innocent III, and then was modified and written into the 1563 Jesuitical Council of Trent document declaration with more than 100 anathemas cursing anyone who dares to disobey the Pope of Rome. It was then rewritten into the Jesuitical document Syllabus of Errors, published on December the 8th, 1864, under the direction of Jesuit Superior General Peter Bex. There it is. 900 years of Rome's murderous threats enshrined in their own documents. This is not anything that I have made up. It is all there for anybody to see and access. And now, understanding this intention against mankind, this is not idle threats. This is being carried out step by step, century by century, through a long string of wars. And we're at the end of it. We're at the tail end of this long campaign, murderous, bloody campaign against humanity that has gone for 5 centuries now. It's not over yet, but we're getting to the end. Looking back over the centuries to 1550, we see a multitude of nations and peoples crushed and destroyed by the Roman Catholic beast empire, with untold hundreds of millions murdered by genocide, civil insurrection, revolution, and war. Anyone who examines the facts closely will not be able to deny that Rome is guilty of causing this chaos and bloodshed, just as the Bible states in Revelation chapter 18 and verse 24. Modern history has not occurred serendipitously. It was and is planned and executed mercilessly by a hidden hand, the militant priesthood of Rome, the Jesuits, who are wolves in sheep's clothing. Savage wolves. Here is a quote by American President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 33-degree Freemason and Jesuit coadjutor, confirming there is no serendipity or random chance in world politics. None. Please pay attention and be free of this illusion that politics is in any way democratic. It is not. He quoted, and I quote, "In politics, Nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. Unquote. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he would know, because he was totally controlled by the Jesuits. What we are witnessing today is the ongoing process of the extermination of Protestant Christianity. The social engineering of the world's populations is called the Counter-Reformation and was inaugurated by the Jesuits of Rome immediately after the Council of Trent in 1563. It is an unholy war against biblical truth and all mankind. It is important to note that modern history is a Roman Catholic history written by Jesuits and Freemasons. Please take the time to read the Fourth Lateran Council, the Council of Trent, and the Syllabus of Errors documents. These will confirm everything I'm saying as truth, and you can download these as PDFs from my website, darknessisfalling.com. In her book, The Black Pope, written in 1896, Mary Cusack, a former nun, states, and I quote, "It is here that the tremendous power of the Church makes itself felt. It is through this Jesuit direction that statesmen are compelled to act, not for the benefit of the country to which they belong, but for the benefit of the Church, which controls them. It is here that matters of the most secret nature are discussed and decided, like the present crusade against Islam, the attack into Afghanistan commencing on the anniversary of the naval Battle of Lepanto, when the armada of the Pope's Knights of Malta destroyed the armada of the Islamic Ottoman Turks on October the 7th, 1571. It is here that alliances are arranged and political treaties are agreed on." Unquote. That's the truth. The Jesuits hate this book. They have defamed the author, making it extremely hard to find a copy anywhere in the world today. This is what they do. They disappear any publication that comes out against them. Through their media empire, they disappear those publications. And in one generation, people become totally unaware of the presence of the Jesuits. That's what it takes, is to disappear publications in one generation. People, all popes believe they are God and have God-given rights and powers. Pope Innocent III, that Antichrist of the Dark Ages, stated in the Fourth Lateran Council document of 1215, and I quote, "For the Pope holds the place on earth not simply of a man, but of the one true God." Unquote. Pope Leo XIII wrote in his encyclical letter dated June the 20th, 1894, "We," and I quote, "we the popes hold upon this earth the place of God Almighty." Unquote. This is undeniable evidence, mouthed repeatedly over 6 centuries, of the threat by the Roman cult to rule the earth. They remain the major threat to humanity and to freedom today. Here's the true Jesuit agenda. Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits and first Jesuit general from 1540 to 1556, wrote in his book, Secret Instructions of the Jesuits, in 1540, and I quote, "But if our hopes in this should be blasted, and since offenses of necessity will come, our political schemes must be cunningly varied, according to the different posture of the times. And princes, our intimates, whom we can influence to follow our counsels, must be pushed on to embroil themselves in vigorous wars, one with another, to the end our society, as promoters of the universal good of the world," what a joke that is, may on all hands be solicited to contribute its assistance, and always employed in being mediators of public dissensions." Unquote. There they are, right there. The founder of the Jesuits admits that they must make all leaders of the world commit themselves to endless war for the purpose that the Jesuits will come out on top in total control. Right there, in that one statement. You cannot argue against this, folks. You cannot. If you're listening to this and you're going, no. There is the facts. You deny the facts at your own peril. The facts are there. It's all documented. Do not turn away from the truth. As hard as it may be to accept it, do not turn away from it. I urge you, accept it and understand this evil, this wickedness that controls the world today. This diabolical goal of the Jesuits has not changed. The Jesuits continue to execute this mandate of Loyola today with ferocious tenacity and heartless cruelty toward the peoples of the earth. They are the masters of war. Now just think about the millions and millions and millions of people who have died in genocides. These were all orchestrated by the Jesuits. Bloody murder against millions, untold millions of innocent civilians, men, women, and children who were butchered without a thought. That's the Jesuit heart. It's as black and wicked as the devil himself. History has been revised by Jesuit authors to the point where it almost doesn't make sense. You read some histories and you think, well, what's going on here? Why does this happen? It just doesn't make sense. So much detail has been omitted and or exaggerated that reference to the Jesuits and their connection to historical events is often difficult to ascertain. However, the truth can readily be found by perusing the writings of Jesuit authors and otherwise who were contemporary to their times and described events accurately and without bias. Original historical pictures and text, when combined, paint an ominous picture of diabolical cunning in covering up the truth about Jesuit involvement. Many scholarly books warning about the Jesuits have been disappeared by the Jesuits through their worldwide media conglomerate and are no longer available for purchase anywhere. Some only as PDFs online. Nevertheless, the truth will come out regardless of Rome's efforts to suppress it. In this video, I will attempt to cut through the myths surrounding two of the most influential characters in modern world history and give a simplified account of who they were and why they did what they did. You are free to make your own judgments, but I'm only presenting the facts. Napoleon Bonaparte, Jesuit agent and servant of Rome. Few people know that Napoleon Bonaparte, born 1769, died 1821, born on the island of Corsica, was raised by Roman Catholic parents and educated first by nuns until the age of 9, and then by the Jesuits in France. You don't hear about that in the history books. You got to look for that information. You can find it. I did. He spent only 4 months, January to May 1779, at the Autun Academy near Aix in France, then was transferred to the Brienne-le-Château military school for 6 years until 1784. Then he was sent to the École Militaire, the military school, in Paris, finishing a 2-year course in 1 year. This was all funded by a mysterious scholarship, but of course, the identity of the patron has never been disclosed. I maintain, and an abundance of evidence points to the fact that the Jesuits, who had a strong base in Corsica, saw potential in Napoleon from the time he was young, and with his parents' agreement, funded him, grooming him up as an obedient hammer of vengeance to crush the enemies of the Jesuits, including popes, Catholic kings and queens of Europe, who had expelled them, other Catholic orders, and the Muslims. The Jesuits never forget and never forgive. They'll wait centuries to take revenge. And this he was to do, changing the political and spiritual face of Europe forever, and laying the foundation for the Jesuits' future Luciferian New World Order, which is here today. And it's almost complete. The Making of a Hammer, Napoleon's Progress from 1785 to 1799. The rise of Napoleon to ruler of France and conqueror of Europe cannot be understood unless it is within the context of a hidden hand assisting him every step of the way. His involvement in the complex Corsican nationalist struggle, while at the same time fighting for France, one of the three protagonists involved, is inexplicable. Wikipedia says he was a supporter of the Republican Jacobin movement, organizing clubs in Corsica. The Jacobins were vicious Masonic thugs, controlled by the Jesuits under the guise of Illuminati. The Jesuits are master political and military agitators, using a vast resource of historical knowledge to usurp advantage over their enemies. All fourth vow Jesuits are highly trained in numerous academic fields and are military tacticians. The Jesuits always use a third party to do their dirty work, while they appear unconnected to major political and spiritual events. And this is why today people cannot understand, when I talk about the Jesuits, how the Jesuits are involved. There doesn't seem to be any connection. Well, it's because they use second, third, and fourth parties to do their dirty work, just like master criminals do. Their tactic is always the same: infiltrate and subvert their enemies secretly from behind the scenes. This behavior is in full accord with their fourth bloody oath. And if they can't infiltrate and subvert, they will launch an all-scale, full-on offensive by creating a war or a revolution. So it's either one or the other. They can't get in secretly, they'll take you down through bloody war. It is vital to remember here that in 1773, the Jesuits had already been suppressed by order of Pope Clement XIV. So Napoleon was being guided covertly by the Jesuits during his rise to power. Napoleon's advisor or handler was Emmanuel Abbé Joseph Sieyès, a Jesuit-trained clergyman, but he was a Jesuit. Writer, political theorist, and founding father of the Jesuitical social sciences. So we can see who invented social science. It was the Jesuits. He was a major political player and took 6 key positions of political power at critical moments during the 10 years of the French Revolution, ensuring Napoleon's hold on power and rise to the place of the French emperor. This description of him by his associates is very chilling, that of a cold and dispassionate man. Van Dusen, on page 22 of his book, Sieyès, His Life and His Nationalism, states, and I quote, "Although Sieyès was passionate about his ideologies, he had a rather uninvolved social life. His journals and papers held much information about his studies, but almost nothing pertaining to his personal life. His associates referred to him as cold and vain. In particular, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord remarked that, and I quote, "Men are in his eyes chess pieces to be moved. They occupy his mind, but say nothing to his heart." Unquote. He's a very cold man, Abbé Sieyès. This is a very accurate description of the Jesuit demeanor. Men devoid of any love for women or God. This is the heart of Satan himself. That's the heart of the Jesuits. The very heart of Satan. No pity. Cold. Black. No passion. Cruel. Beyond comprehension. Just as major political leaders today have powerful Jesuit handlers standing behind them, so did Napoleon. And you can see the pictures today of the powerful men of the world with Jesuit handlers standing behind them. You can find that online. It's not difficult to find. He did as he was told in exchange for earthly reward. Time and again we read that Napoleon disobeyed commands or left his post or backed the opposing side and yet was not reprimanded, punished, or shot for treason. How is that even possible? Only if powerful people were looking out for him and paving the way forward. That's it. And pave the Jesuits did. He got away with murder. For example, he was promoted to captain in the regular army in July 1792, despite exceeding his leave of absence and leading a riot against French troops. He's a French commander leading a riot against the French military. Think about that. A French commander leading a riot against French troops. Isn't that treason? No problem. Instead of punishment or death, he was promoted. That's Jesuitical. Promotion for doing evil. That's a red flag. It is a diabolical, Jesuitical inversion of what is right. This happens again and again when reading the story of Napoleon's rapid rise to power. Somewhere between 1785 and 1795, Napoleon became a high-ranking Freemason in the Grand Lodge of Paris. You won't find, that's not easy to find either, that information. And that was recorded by Catholic historian Nesta Webster. European Freemasonry had been taken over by the Jesuits by 1776, when the Illuminati was created by Adam Weishaupt as a front for the Jesuits to conceal the Jesuits' underground actions during their 41-year suppression. Napoleon was Roman Catholic, a Freemason, and the willing servant of the Luciferian Jesuits. He was never at any stage acting as an independent agent, but totally complicit with his Jesuit masters. Napoleon understands fully who the Jesuits were and admits it. In exile on St. Helena, between 1815 and 1821, he wrote, and I quote, "The Jesuits are a military organization, not a religious order. Their chief is a general of an army, not the mere father abbot of a monastery. And the aim of this organization is power. Power in its most despotic exercise. Absolute power. Universal power. Power to control the world by the volition of a single man. Jesuitism is the most absolute of despotisms, and at the same time the greatest and most enormous of abuses." Unquote. Wow. Wow. The Jesuits used Napoleon and then used their English lackeys to assassinate him when he became expendable. That's what they do. That's what criminals do. They'll use you and then kill you. Could Napoleon's warning to us from the grave be any clearer? Napoleon, dictator of France. In 1792, Napoleon was promoted to captain in the French regular army. He's already proven his revolutionary salt to his ghostly superiors in Corsica. In 1793, as artillery commander of the Army of Italy, he is wounded during the siege of Toulon and promoted to brigadier general at the age of 24. He is made commander of forces guarding the Republican National Convention in 1795, repulsing the royalist forces, becoming famous, and thus promoted to commander of the interior and commander of the Army of Italy. In 1797, after a succession of victories in the Italian campaign, France controls northern Italy, Venice, the lowland countries, and brings Austria to heel. Between 1797 and 1799, Napoleon drives the Knights Hospitaller, later to be known as the Knights of Malta, out of Malta, crushes the Mamluk Islamic ruling caste in Egypt, and lays brutal siege to coastal towns in Palestine, what we know as Palestine today, or Israel, like Jaffa and Acre in the Ottoman territory of Syria and Galilee, in order to establish French control of the trade route to India via the Middle East. Or so the books say. I don't believe it. Looks more like Roman Catholic payback to the Muslims who opposed the Pope's attempts to capture Jerusalem and the Holy Land during the four major crusades between 1096 and 1291. Payback. That's what the Jesuits and the Roman Catholic Empire does. It pays back its enemies. It may take centuries, but they will. On November 9th, 1799, which adds up to 911, Napoleon, by rewriting the Constitution and fudging the numbers in a rigged plebiscite, gets himself elected as first consul and effectively becomes dictator of France. So, by 1799, he's the dictator of France. Remember that the bloody French Revolution is happening simultaneously between 1789 and 1799, while Napoleon is campaigning in the field, punishing the Jesuits' enemies, and that he becomes dictator of France on the same date that the revolution ends. Wow, what brilliant timing is that? November the 9th, 1799. If you call that coincidence, then you just aren't paying attention. This was all planned by the Jesuits down to the exact day and month they wanted. 9/11. A number which has very high occult significance to Luciferians. Napoleon, the French Caesar. Napoleon isn't done yet. In 1800, he crushes the Austrians in northern Italy, and by 1802 has signed a treaty with the British. Using political intrigue and assassination plots against him, he harnesses sympathy and gets himself elected as emperor in 1804, believing himself to be a Roman Caesar. It's all Roman, folks. It's all about Rome and Roman symbology. It's all Roman. The Jesuits had recreated a new Roman Empire. Don't think so? Napoleon was crowned with a gold Roman laurel wreath. The laurel wreath of the victor. And a replica of Charlemagne's crown was also made, but Napoleon apparently refused to wear it, and we don't know why. Napoleon greatly admired the Romans and preferred being the new Augustus Caesar of the Jesuits' newly created Holy Roman Empire, based in France. Here's a note. Charlemagne was the first Holy Roman Emperor, crowned in AD 800 on December the 25th. You just can't make this stuff up. December 25th is the height of the Luciferian winter solstice, later to become Christ Mass, a pagan Roman Catholic celebration of Saturnalia. It's all Luciferian. Nothing to do with Christianity at all. Between 1805 and 1814, Napoleon waged an ongoing campaign of battles against 3 more coalitions of European nations. Examining the different alliances and counter-alliances, battles that were thrown, and decisions that resulted in ultimate defeat, we see the rise and then steady decline of Napoleon. But even more telling, we see the Jesuit hand maneuvering the European powers like chess pieces on a board. Is it possible to display such genius in some battles? For example, at Austerlitz, Jena, and Auerstadt? Brilliant tactician. And then stupidity in others. For example, Leipzig, Aspern-Essling, and Waterloo. What happened? With Napoleon, this strange contradiction is what we see. It doesn't make sense. Unless someone is telling him what to do. Napoleon's Russian campaign is very telling. He waited until June 24th, 1812 to invade, but the Russians kept retreating and stalling until September the 7th. When they finally engaged Napoleon near Moscow, defeated, the Russians burned Moscow and retreated again. Napoleon waited another 5 weeks before making a decision to return to France. Why? Of course, the winter snows trapped the French army, and more than 350,000 men perished from exposure and the Cossack sword. Because of that delay, Napoleon, like a coward, abandoned his army to their fate and fled back to Paris in a sled. Can you believe it? This was the Jesuits destroying the youthful republican manhood of France. Napoleon was ordered to leave them there, abandon them, and come back to Paris. The Jesuits would do exactly the same to the youth of the German army, using Hitler and his Operation Barbarossa invasion of Russia in 1941. Exactly the same thing. Hitler would ignore the advice of his generals, resulting in an estimated 830,000 men lost in battle and as a result of the extreme winter conditions in Russia. Hitler, like Napoleon, inexplicably also delayed his invasion by 2 critical weeks, contributing greatly to the failure of a campaign which should have succeeded militarily. Any military tactician will tell you that what happened should not have happened. In his History of the Jesuits, written in 1854, G.B. Niccolini, a Protestant Italian patriot exiled to England, wrote, and I quote, "There is no record in history of an association whose organization has stood for 300 years unchanged and unaltered by all the assaults of men and time, and which has exercised such an immense influence over the destinies of mankind. The ends justify the means is his favorite maxim, and as his only end, as we have shown, is the order. At its bidding, the Jesuit is ready to commit any crime whatsoever." Unquote. That's the Jesuit mind. The end justifies the means. They can commit any atrocity without one pang of conscience. the Roman eagle, and Caesar Napoleon. Napoleon continued to fight on against a coalition of European powers after his disaster in Russia. Again, he delayed in his tactics, allowing his enemies to gain the upper hand so that by 1814 the game is up as they close in on him. Why did he do this? He is banished to the island of Elba, and the European powers then squabble over a peace plan for Europe at the Congress of Vienna between November 1814 and June 1815. Miraculously, Napoleon escapes. And on February 26th, he's back in France with full support of the army and leaders beginning a new campaign. How is this possible? This man leads a charmed life. But people, it's more than that. He has total assistance from the Jesuits from behind the scenes. He is then defeated at Waterloo by Wellington and Leberecht von Blücher, where he throws the battle to the English. Why? Well, we now know, because the Jesuits used the news of the battle to feign defeat of the British and take control of the Bank of England through their papal Jew banker Nathan Mayer Rothschild, who bought up all of what were suddenly deemed as worthless stocks at pennies in the pound before his ruse was discovered. Too late. The Bank of England and the City of London are totally owned and controlled by the Jesuits today. That is brilliance. That's the mind of the Jesuits. Military geniuses. People, Napoleon was a pawn in the hands of the Jesuits. Abbe Sieyès gave him his orders and he complied. A victory here, a defeat there, according to the Jesuit plan for the chessboard of Europe. In the end, they checkmate him, killing him with arsenic in exile. Did he see it coming? The ignoble end of a hammer of vengeance used to smash the non-compliant Catholic monarchs of Europe and eliminate the Protestant peoples of Europe. That's what it's all about. Between 1789 and 1815, the Jesuits brilliantly killed many birds with one stone. Number one, they got rid of their obedient hammer Napoleon in 1815 after using him to crush the kings and queens of Europe. Number two, they took revenge on their enemy, the Dominican order, assassinating thousands of priests during the French Revolution. Number three, they did the same with their political enemies, beheading, shooting, and imprisoning more than 50,000 victims. Number four, they formed a holy alliance through their tool, Prince Clemens von Metternich of Austria, with the monarchs of Europe through the Congress of Vienna and later the secret Treaty of Verona in 1822 to suppress all attempts by the peoples of Europe for popular government. Number five, they expanded their nascent American empire with the bargain basement purchase of the Louisiana Territory for $15 million. And finally, number six, they resurfaced triumphant from suppression on August the 7th, 1814, nearly 41 years later, in almost total control of Europe under the guise of the mysterious Illuminati. Brilliance. Here is a quote by M. Josephson, an American physician and historian, in his 1968 book, The Federal Reserve Conspiracy and Rockefellers. He quotes, "Weishaupt and his fellow Jesuits cut off the income to the Vatican by launching and leading the French Revolution, by directing Napoleon's conquest of Catholic Europe, and by eventually having Napoleon throw Pope Pius VII in jail at Avignon until he agreed as the price for his release to re-establish the Jesuit order. This Jesuit war on the Vatican was terminated by the Congress of Vienna and by the secret 1822 Treaty of Verona." Unquote. Note: John Clark Ridpath writes in his Ridpath's Universal History, Volume 14 and page 748, I quote, "Being one of the greatest enigmas of history, Napoleon was a tool of the order," the Jesuit order. As a result of the order's suppression in 1773, Napoleon, believing the people should not have the Bible in their own language pursuant to the Council of Trent, was brought to power out of Corsica, the order's island fortress. Through Bonaparte's military exploits, the Jesuits imprisoned the papal Caesar and drove the Roman Catholic monarchs of Europe into exile until they had learned their lesson to never interfere with the power of the Black Pope. Here we see the great betrayal by the emperor as he abandons his grand army of 250,000 men? No, it was more. To the Snows and Cossacks of Russia in 1812. Those brave men, truly believing they were fighting for liberty, could not be allowed to return to France, the order intending to reduce Europe to the tyranny of the Holy Alliance. To further dash the hopes of the French, Napoleon, betrayed by his Jesuit masters, including the Jesuit-trained coadjutor Abbé Sieyès, was confined to St. Helena, an island in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, and in due time given the orders "poison cup" by his detested English jailer in 1821. Unquote. By 1822, the stage is set for the Jesuits to move their plan for world domination forward under the leadership of Black Pope Johannes Philipp Ruthan, 21st Superior General of the Jesuits between 1829 and 1853. The plans are set for the American Civil War between 1861 and 1865 to divide America and suppress democratic autonomy. The Jesuits will incite a multitude of wars in every part of the world, using European empires subservient to Rome to military suppress all attempts at establishing popular government and self-rule by indigenous peoples. They don't want democratic governments. They don't want nationalist governments. They want governments with dictators that are totally controlled by Rome. The Holy Alliance of 1815 had consisted of Russia, led by the Romanovs, Prussia, led by the Hohenzollerns, and Austria, led by the Habsburgs. But by 1914, all three had long abandoned Rome, asserting their independence and thwarting the Jesuits' master plan. The Jesuits were enraged and embroiled Protestant, Lutheran, Prussian Germany, and Austria in the First World War, ending in their defeat and humiliation by 1918. Then, in 1917, they orchestrated the Bolshevist Revolution in Russia, assassinating the royal family and turning the country into a Marxist hellhole. These events then set the scene on the world stage for the events that followed a few decades later in Germany, Italy, Spain, and Japan, culminating in World War II. The Jesuits had orchestrated World War I, and now they would finish the job with World War II, completing their second 30-year war against Protestant Christianity. People, the Jesuits control this world system with the power pyramid they have created over 500 years. They have succeeded in deceiving the whole world. If you have persisted reading this far, then it means you are looking for answers. I have done my best to warn you of the danger that lies ahead. Every human soul will die and stand before God at the last judgment. There is no escape. Everyone who has ever lived will face the judgment and an eternal destiny in either heaven or hell. Just as it is written in Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 27, just as man is appointed to die once, and after that to face the judgment. Jesus Christ said in John chapter 14 and verse 6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father, God, but through me. There is no other way to be saved from sin and death. God loves you, and his free offer of mercy is being extended now. But time is running out on human history. This age is almost finished, and darkness is falling rapidly as the Jesuit Vatican New World Order beast system implements world fascist control. These truly are the last days. This is happening right now. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you in your search for the truth. Please share this information so that others may be warned about what is coming. I hope to see you in the next video.